Might be correct. Thank you, Deborah. You always change your voice for that moment. All right, here we go. Maybe I'll screen share it with you so you can sing with me. I've been to Romemu, I've been to BJ, I've searched all over for a place to pray. I found the mosh pit and knew that this was it. I am a MOSh-nik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. I found community that is in tune with me, singing and dancing in our Zoom agog. Some contemplation mixed with elation. I am a MOSh-nik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. A chance to meet you, a place to greet you. A time to deepen what it means to belong. Everybody, let's have some fun tonight and spread some joy and light. I am a MOSh-nik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. And if Hoff was here, here it'd be. And Ruben, welcome. Judy Rakusin, always singing along. Welcome, Judy. Sherry Baker, Sylvia, you win. Also, twice in one day award. Mira Appel, welcome. Okay, let's stop that foolishness and get on with the evening. I'm going to turn things over now to, first of all, stopping the share. By the way, all of that is copywritten. You cannot steal my words, but you can sing them to anyone you want to in the world. And with apologies to Neil Young. Shulamit.
Look at me. Hello, everyone. How are you? You all look lovely tonight. Each and every square. Delightful to see you. So you all know how important I think stories are. We each have stories that really need to be told. They're part of our soul, they're part of our heart, they're part of our lives that we can share with other people. And I feel like tonight's a really special evening because we have asked some people to share their journey around becoming Jewish. And for me, it seems like such a big subject. Having been born Jewish and having looked at other religions, it never occurred to me to give up my Judaism, just to sort of share it around. So I'm really interested in how you found your Judaism, what it means to you. And I think the biggest question that I would love if you could answer is, do you feel like you belong now that you've made this decision? So the first person is going to be our wonderful Bina Block. And Bina, as you know, you have 10 minutes. And at the end of the 10 minutes...
No, she doesn't. She has 5 to 7 minutes, but a full 10 minutes, including any follow-up questions that you might have. Okay. And I add to that, if anybody else has a question for a presenter, to put it into the chat. We may or may not pick up on it. I can't make any promises right now about that.
I was just going to say that too. Okay, that's a good thing. So if you have a question, put it in the chat. If we can pick it up, we will. I will set a timer for 6 minutes, Bina. You have 5 to 7. And when the bing goes off, that means you should complete your thought if possible.
It means I can't be Jewish anymore. That's what it is. Okay.
All right, blessings, my dear. Go for it.
All right, thank you. Hi.
And sorry, Bina, and you can spotlight Bina if you want to. In the upper right-hand corner, you can go from gallery view to spotlight in order to see her a little more clearly and love her a little more dearly.
My gesticulations, yes. Well, hi, good evening. This is Conversion Wednesday. Wow. All right. So what I decided to do was to give you a very brief timeline about how this all transpired, very quick. And then my 3 favorite things of what happened to me during converting. So my dad is Jewish, but had no Jewish upbringing. He was a cultural Jew, and my mother was a very angry ex-Catholic who did not want me to talk about God, which is all I wanted to talk about from about the age of 8 on. And when I was 8, I went to my dad and said, it's time for me to be Jewish, and he said, no. He said, but you can go to church if you want to, when you're older. So when I was 13, I took off for church with a friend, and we sat up in the balcony and listened to the organ, and it was transformative, and I adored it. And I figured if I'm allowed, at least I can kind of be a reporter. I come from a newspaper family. I can be a reporter in church. So that was my first church. I probably joined 6 or 7 along the way because I lived in different places, and I got progressively more charismatic. I ended up in a huge gospel choir in Los Angeles, run by Rose Stone of Sly and the Family Stone fame. It was the most amazing experience. It's probably the holiest musical experience I've ever had. That was quite something. And then for 40 years, I was in church. I never bought the dogma that was the only way to God. I thought Jesus was a fabulous Jewish guy who was trying to teach all these heathens, what Jews already knew. That was my point of view. And I was the only one in my family who was choosing Judaism. So let's see what happened then. So I ended up in a Messianic congregation, which most Jews don't like, but actually I was ignorant of that fact at the time, and it was a great education because the rabbi of that place ran pretty much a conservative service with a little Brit Hadashah at the end, is what they called it, of the New Covenant reading. And you never heard the name Jesus. And it was as Jewish an experience as I'd ever had. I thought it was completely Jewish. It was for me. It was my training in the conservative service, because when I moved north in California, I went to my local shul. Levi Darby was the rabbi, and Chai Levi had just been ordained, and they started to teach me so that I could convert. And so that's the timeline, and there are many, 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 many stories in there. But with this amount of time, I can tell you my 3 favorite things that happened. So one is I had the most amazing mikveh ever. And it's only amazing to me. It wouldn't have worked for you, but oh my gosh. So it was in San Francisco, and I had 2 friends singing harmony with me the whole time. And my Beit Din was outside, except for one of them was a woman, so she was with me. And Alan Liu, of blessed memory, Zikaron Livraha, who wrote, This is Real and You're Completely Unprepared, that we read during Elul, a incredible person. He yelled into the mikveh, Bina, are you sure? I said, bubble, 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 yes, Oh, God. So that was extraordinary. Just the whole experience of the singing and the harmony and the water and the coming up feeling like a completely new person, somebody I had always wanted to be. And I didn't have a clue what that meant yet, but I knew that I was that person now. And so that was exciting. My second favorite thing is that I got to choose my own name, which I just feel terrible for some people who have to take these names from their, some of those names I'm not sure would have worked for me, but I looked on the tree, which I didn't know very much about, the tree of life, and I wanted a bee name that kind of would work with Barbara. And there was Bina, and I looked up Barbara, and Barbara means strange and foreign. And I thought, I had felt strange and foreign a lot in my life, and I was ready for a new name. And Bina became Bina Raphaela, which is about understanding and discernment with healing, which is my name, Bina Raphaela Bat Avraham Basara. And I treasure that name. It is still aspirational, although I think in 20 years since I took it on, I've come a little closer to being a discerning person. And Reb Zalman gave me a great honor when I got to spend a few minutes with him at that Shabbaton in Boulderado. Remember that? Mark was there, and he led all the davening for a weekend. And Reb Zalman looked at me and said that I had, sorry, it always makes me cry, I had an understanding heart. And I'm grateful for that, very grateful for that moment. So I love that name. And then the third thing that has been miraculous until COVID was that holding a Torah scroll for the first time was, yeah, that's how it was. It was, I don't have words. It was like wrapping your arms around God and pulling God in. It was just the most marvelous thing. And then learning how to chant it was even better. And Eli Welber, I don't know if anybody knows Eli Welber, but he's this wonderful man who taught me how to chant Torah. And I get to do it again with Eliana. And just for a few verses, it's going to feel kind of wonderful. We won't have a scroll, but it's close, very close. There's something about coming into a Jewish identity. And there are many stories about the thought process that we all went through and all the different ways that happens for us. I'm the only Jew in my family, and they all call me Barb, and they hit that R real hard. Barb! And I always look at them and think, wouldn't it be fun if I could have talked my family into calling me Bina? Time. Okay. Time or 1 minute. Time. Thank you, Debarty.
Shamati. I'm sorry, Bina. I thought you heard me.
No, sorry, I didn't. It's fine. I was done.
Well, you did a fabulous job. And my one follow-up question is, do you feel like you belong to Judaism?
Oh, definitely. But it took me a while because sometimes I have to battle, I still don't know enough. And, everybody I know, right? I know we all suffer from this, or most of us do, especially students, right? Because we didn't grow up with the language in our ears, which is something I've always been jealous about. It's harder as an adult. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing with us. I really appreciate it. Your story is very inspirational.
Thank you.
It's lovely. So the next person to share with us is Elka. Is she here?
Elka is not here. So let's move on to the next person, which
What
will.
a great idea. Okay.
We'll text her to remind her.
I texted
Okay.
her and didn't get a reply.
Meanwhile, did I say that correctly? Is that how you pronounce your first name? It is. Would you be kind enough to go next?
Sure. So I came to America when I was not quite 7 years old from Vietnam, from parents who had been born Buddhist and who both converted to Catholicism when we were in South Vietnam. And I grew up first with the family that sponsored us, who were very Midwestern and Methodist in Philadelphia, but in a pretty hippy-dippy neighborhood in Philadelphia. And my very first memory of Judaism was actually, I had maybe 2 Jewish friends in grade school, but I realized that I envied them the most. And I couldn't have explained to you why at the time, except that I knew I was a black sheep in my family in how skeptical and questioning I was. And it felt to me like they had the freedom to be skeptical and questioning. And that wasn't as welcome in the faith places that I was brought to. My father was a teacher, which in Vietnamese culture means you're also the family social worker and the mayor and the lawyer and all these things. And so we ping-ponged between an Irish Catholic congregation in Mount Airy and the Vietnamese congregation in South Philly. And I could make myself blend into those places, not very well, but I certainly didn't feel like I belonged. And I certainly didn't feel like my kind of, sharp elbowed kind of questioning would be welcome. But I also grew up in Quaker Philadelphia. And so I just kind of rode with it. And I was also raised to believe that my needs were not the most important thing in the world. And so I just sort of let it ride under the surface. When I was in medical school, I kind of gingerly asked a Jewish friend what she thought of conversions. And she said, well, it kind of runs counter to the whole chosen people thing. And that shut me down for about a decade. And then I had my second child. And when he was a baby, I realized I was missing something, that kind of hunger you have. And I realized what it was music. I was among the more musical in my family growing up, and I needed it more than other people, but I hadn't had that kind of music since church as a kid. So I asked a friend what to do, and she said, well, come to my Episcopal congregation. It's practically atheist. Half the people there are Jews and the other half are gay or whatever. So just come. So I went, and she was right. And the sermon was great. But then it was time to stand up and sing the hymnals. And I opened the hymnal and I got stuck because I couldn't even mouth the words Jesus or Savior. And so I shut the book and walked home. And between the church and home, I decided that it was time. And I won't tell you the funny story about how I got to Temple Micah in DC, but essentially, the short of it is that Danny Zemmel, the rabbi, finally returned my call, and he listened to my life story. And then he said, well, the class has already started, but you only missed one session, so come next Tuesday. I said, aren't you supposed to turn me away 3 times first? He said, yeah, it depends on how funny you are. You have a good sense of humor? It's like, I have a great sense of humor. Great, and you've got spunk. See you Tuesday. I gotta go, right? And when I got to the conversion class, he opened up the ceiling as high and as wide as I had dreamt it would be. And there was so much arguing. It got so loud in there. And there were so many ex-Catholics that I knew I had landed. And then this is just blending into one of my favorite things, but I will share in this space. It's easier and easier for me to talk about it because I've, written a memoir manuscript about this, but I'm dissociative. I responded to the trauma of immigration by creating alter egos. And the one that I was most aware of growing up was a boy just a little bit older than me named Michael. And over time, it became clear that Michael had a Jewish mother and an Eastern European father who had a little bit of Asia in his eyes. I didn't piece all this together until it came time for the mikveh. By then, I had realized who Michael was, that he wasn't some fantasy lover. He was me. And so when it came time to the mikveh, I didn't really have to think about a name. It had been chosen for me. So my Hebrew name is Michaela. And so that's the short of it. I guess the other tendrils you should know about to understand my experience of this is that I'm married to not even a cultural Jew. He's not even ambivalent. He just doesn't keep any of it close to him. He doesn't feel that, even though he understands that the world identifies him as Jewish. And my Swiss Israeli friend Yadena says, you tell your atheist husband he is the most Jewish Jew I've ever met. My boys, let me introduce them to Temple, but it was really hard to help them hang on to that between life and, the congregation being across town and new demanding jobs and a husband who just isn't into it. So I guess, I have a lot of ambivalences about not whether I belong, but whether I will ever have the time and space to catch up to my ambition of it. I certainly don't know enough. I barely know any Hebrew. I grew up, reading and rereading Isaac Bashevis Singer and all of a kind family and all these things. And they were like my secret tribe. But I've never met that ambition. So that's what's left to be done. But this is one of those spaces where I don't ask whether others allow me to belong. I've just finally claimed it for myself.
Good for you. What a wonderful thing to be able to say. Yay. Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's very deep and very meaningful. Thank you. Did you enjoy telling it?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a ham.
Good. Not me. Thank you so much, Mai. I really appreciate it. It was beautiful.
Shulamit, if I might add something, which is I can only assume that each of our presenters tonight, there'll be moments in other people's presenting where there's going to be a Me Too moment, moments that resonate very deeply for you. And I would appreciate it if you would keep a kind of running track of that, so that when after everybody is presented, that perhaps we might go into that. Or if you wanted to do it after somebody has presented, to say, I something similar for you that echoes from another person's story. Okay.
Yay. Yep. The next presenter is Mary. I believe she is here.
I am here.
There you are. And we are looking forward to hearing your story, my dear.
Oh, I could go on about 3 years, but I won't. I was raised as a Roman Catholic in a family that had a lot of home rituals, and I attended Catholic day school for 10 years. I'm every Jewish parent's nightmare. When I was 10, Pope John the 23rd began the Second Vatican Council, which promoted dialogue and improved communications between peoples of all faith, including Jews. One of his key values was questioning. Unfortunately, not all parish priests agreed with that. I've always been a boundary pusher, even in those early years, and some people handled my questions better than others. One of my earliest questions was, when I went to confession, why did I have to confess thinking about bad things, doing bad things to my brothers, even if I hadn't done them? It gave me a feeling that thoughts were more important than actions, and I had a real problem with that. In 1976, I moved to DC and met Neil shortly thereafter. He was actually the first Jew I knew in any kind of detail at all, because growing up in the Midwest and farm country, there weren't a whole lot of Jews. We were married in 1978 by Rabbi Harold White, who was one of the few in the area at that time that did interfaith marriages. And he refused to talk about conversion. He said, marrying Harold, Neil says. He said, if we talk about conversion now, it'll be for the wrong reasons. You shouldn't convert because you're getting married. That's not right. I said, oh, okay, fine. But I did agree that since I couldn't raise my kids as Catholics, that we would have a Jewish household, and that we would raise the kids Jewish, as long as Neil was willing to drive them to Hebrew school, because I had heard stories about kids being driven to Hebrew school. I had participated in an Intro to Judaism course, and I found it piqued my interest in a lot of ways, and we ended up joining Temple Sinai in the district at that time, because I knew enough to know that having a Jewish household meant being part of a Jewish community. And I approached Rabbi Eugene J. Lippman of blessed memory, who was one of the liberating rabbis at Auschwitz, and said to Gene, I wanted to convert. And Gene looked at me and he said, you don't have enough knowledge to make that decision yet, but I'm willing to study with you. And so for the next 2 years, we studied. Gene would give me a book every month, and then I'd come back a month later and we'd talk about it. And if I had questions, he'd answer them. But at each step along the way, I didn't have any questions. I kept waiting for my inner voice to say, no, this isn't going to work. And instead, I felt like I was coming home. And when I didn't have any questions, Gene would fill the time talking about his experiences and his family. I often said he grafted me onto the tree of Jewish life, not just, whatever. Anyhow, after about 2 years, Gene said, so what are we going to do? What do you want to do about this conversion thing? And I said, well, I want to go through with it. And he said, okay. He said, I thought you would. He said, what kind of a conversion do you want to have? Because there are variety. And we decided that I would follow what was then a traditional conversion, because at that point it was being recognized in Israel. And I couldn't see myself ever wanting to move to Israel, but I didn't want to deprive my kids of that option if they wanted it. So I went to the mikveh and I answered the questions of the Bet Din, and that's what we did. And I don't remember it being that big a deal for me, as some of the others have spoken. I just kept feeling like I was coming home. And then I was really lucky because at Sinai, I met a number of women who were willing to take me under their wings. They answered questions non-judgmentally. They shared their experiences and practices. They invited us to their homes for holiday celebration. It was really great. And what had attracted me to Judaism initially was the emphasis on home ritual and values-based decision-making. Our home ritual was boosted when one of my kids came home from preschool in tears. Mommy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mommy. What are you sorry for? I'm really sorry. What are you sorry for? Turns out one of the kids in preschool had told him that he must have been really naughty if Santa never came to his house. So I took a deep breath and I said, well, Christmas wasn't a Jewish holiday. We had our own holidays. Like what? He said. And I began a list: Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, Hanukkah, Purim, Pesach, Shavuot. And I said, best of all, we get Shabbat every week. We do? He said. And that week we began our family home Shabbat observances. Blessings over kids, wine, challah, a little bit of telling tales, and also just having special cookies that are still called oneg cookies. I ended up pulling our kids out of religious school because it didn't work, and so I homeschooled them. And eventually I became a Jewish educator, teacher, consultant, director, workshop presenter, curriculum writer. And my favorite part was when my students would ask me a question and I'd say, gee, I don't know. We'll have to find out the answer and I'll let you know next week. And the other criteria for me has always been the importance of community. Individuals with whom I can study, from whom I can receive support, and to whom I can give support. People with whom I can laugh and cry and be genuine with in a safe environment. And in the words of Robert Frost, that has made all the difference. Thank you. I can't hear you, Shulamit.
If I only unmuted, it would be better.
Or if I knew how to read lips, that would help.
I just wanted to say that I feel like you're such a core member of this community, and that you just belong here, and we all appreciate the fact that you're here. At least I'm assuming we do.
Well, and Mark and Renee, thank you. Mark and Renee played a huge part in our life. They really did. And Mark, I didn't give you the kavod you were entitled to, but I was only allowed to speak for a short time.
He feels kavoded. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And the next is Mary Rita.
Okay. So I take it Elka's not here yet.
As far as I know, she has not arrived. Did anyone
Okay.
text her? I could try that myself. but
I've texted her twice and I haven't gotten a response.
okay.
Okay. So, in my timeline, I feel like I have to go a couple of years before I was born, linked with our first trip to Israel, which was definitely after I was born. But when Dan and I went to the Children's Memorial at Yad Vashem, and if you've been there, you go in and you go down. It's really like almost it's like going into the womb. And when you go, you see the twinkle lights for the 1,000,000,000 stars, and names are being read. And they were being read in English when we were there. And it touched my heart because I felt so connected with those names and those people. And the only one that I remembered was Miriam, age 13, Antwerp. And I knew that that was me, that somehow her soul was connected with my soul. And so when I look at my Jewish timeline, I know that Miriam was part of my soul that was in my mother's womb. And I see that as the next point along my timeline, because I often say that I learned in my mother's womb to pray and to meditate. And I was gifted enough to be born into a Catholic family where faith was really important, and where we went to Mass on Sundays, and where once a month my brother and I got piled in the car to go to confession. And we learned that God was important in our lives. And I think that was really an important seed. And from the time I was about 5 or 6, or at least in first grade, that's when the first question, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because part of my journey onto being Jewish, I believe, was the time that I really felt called to be a Catholic sister, because it was at age 18 that I first learned how really to dive deeply into the scripture and to pray a lot more deeply than I had learned to pray before. And if there were gifts of being in the convent, as we say, it is to love community. And I learned to develop a prayer life, which has developed much more deeply in, let's say, the last 5 years of my who I am as a Jewish woman. And just to live, as Rev Sheffer would say, to know how to live with love at the center of my life. But after about 15 years, I just knew that I needed to grow up, and there were things that I needed to live in my life. And I made the decision to leave the convent, and a couple of years after that, a choice to leave Catholicism, and I left Catholicism for 3 specific things that I can remember at this time. And one was the church's treatment and teaching about homosexuality, and also the treatment and their teaching about separated and divorced Catholics. And I worked a lot with separated and divorced Catholics in the ministry that I had. And the third was when John Paul II said that women really couldn't be in leadership in the church, especially as priests. And that was like the final straw. And so I made a choice to leave. It was a little more slowly, trying to figure out where Jesus fit in my life. Because if you asked who was God in my life, very much it was to Jesus that I prayed. But the Jesus that I know now feels like brother, feels like friend, feels like my teacher, my rabbi. And that I now am able to look at the parables and look at so many of the teachings in the Gospels that I love and see them through my eyes as a Jewish woman, as I really believe Jesus must have seen them and known them as as a Jewish man. Um, and I met Dan really early in my journey after I left the convent. So he's part of my journey to Judaism also, because he was the one that I asked the questions of. And I have lots of memories of different places. Once, like a visit to the zoo, and I was asking him all kinds of things. But I also said to him, find something joyful about Judaism, because I was used to going to church once a week, and I wanted to find a synagogue. And so at that point in our life, we found Reconstruction, the Recons, and Oseh Shalom. And when we went there, I reached out to Rabbi Fink and said, I'm used to getting to know my clergy. Can I come talk to you? And he said, why don't we study? You know, he said, I studied about intertestamental times. Let's just start studying. And it wasn't for conversion. It was just to see how it felt like a really good deep ecumenism when I didn't know that word at that time. And that experience, the deep ecumenism that Reb Zalman has taught us, and really his vision is that we are all one, and we really need to be in one so that God field can just grow and grow and grow, and we can bring harmony and healing to our world. Go fast timeline. The week of, in 1996, the week of the Parasha Lech Lecha, that's where Abraham gets called to come, to leave his country. And I was reading the Jewish week before I went to bed that Friday night. And I read, you know, he left his family and his land and went to another land. And I went, I really did say, oh shit, because I wasn't intending to convert. But it's like I knew, I could feel it in my heart. It was like that was the call, you know. In the Christian Bible, in the Acts of the Apostle, Paul gets knocked off a horse. You know, I was reading the Jewish week, and I
Froze. I think that Mary Rita froze.
I think she got
It's a
knocked
time
off a horse. There we go.
Yeah.
Mary Rita, you
I got
back?
knocked off my horse.
Okay.
I'm back.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
You have about a half
And
a minute.
Okay, I'll go real fast. I did have a bet in, but what was important to me was that I had a woman on that and a lay person. And I had a rabbi, a lay person, one of the founders of Oseh Shalom, one of the original founders, and the mikveh lady, because we couldn't find a woman rabbi that was available the day that I had my conversion. And I never had a formal bat mitzvah, but my Hebrew teacher said, you are going to chant Torah on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And so in 1997, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, they were my.
Oh, Mary Rita, I'm so sorry.
He
Dan,
hasn't stopped chanting since then.
Okay, that's fine.
You are her husband, Dan. You
No,
can,
no, I haven't.
Fill in the blanks and just
yes,
add.
you can complete her sentences.
Do I get 2-minute rebuttal or?
Do I belong? I feel like I've come home. I think that the Jewish that have lived in many, many incarnations, that I stepped into it in this lifetime. And since 2018, since davening leadership that I went to, and since my Hashba'ah training to be a spiritual director, and knowing Jewish renewal and MOSh, thank you very much, Mary and Neil, for leading us to MOSh. The depth of my Jewishness has really, really grown, and this is home.
well, welcome home,
Especially-
Mary Rita.
Yeah, so I'm home, and I'm living deep
Yay.
ecumenism.
Thank you so much. And I'm really pleased to hear your story. I knew that you had been in the convent, but that was about all I knew. So it's a very interesting story. And I bet there's room for more flowers. Yeah. Thank you again. So Eliana, my dear, it's your turn. You need to unmute before you can talk to us, though.
Yeah, I'll do that.
There you go.
Okay, good. Well, I really could relate with Mary Meyerson. I also have felt like 7 minutes is absolutely way too short. What I would like to do is invite everybody over to my house for a pajama party, and we can really get to storytelling. I also can relate to Mary Rita. I too was raised Catholic, and as a little girl, my playtime was mostly playing that I was a nun or playing that I was a priest. Well, my father squashed that idea and sent me to Austria instead as an exchange student, which absolutely changed my life. I was raised Catholic, as I said, and now I'm a Jew. My journey to Judaism took about 40 years, and much of the time was spent in the wilderness. You know, and it was a difficult trek for me with mountaintop experiences and little tastes of hell. But tonight, I want to relate a story to you about what counts. So it was our 40th anniversary. And on our 40th anniversary, we celebrated a marriage that had survived 429 tubes of toothpaste squeezed the wrong way, 3 children and 3 sets of braces, 5 dogs and 4 homes, 2,583 arguments and just about that many reconciliations, 1 bout of prostate cancer, 1 near conversion to Judaism, 1 near divorce because of it, a few months of perfect hate, and 40 years of love. And you know, all that counts. We celebrated our 40 years of marriage with a 3-week trip to South America. Well, we were in Cusco, Peru. Now, Cusco's a charming little colonial town, the departure city for travelers who are going to Machu Picchu, which we were doing. It was Passover. And for 30 years, since those early days when I'd studied Judaism and nearly divorced because of it, I'd celebrated Passover. Even when, for the sake of shalom bayit, the sake of peace in our family, I gave up my dreams of conversion, I celebrated the Jewish feast in my own way. Each Passover Eve, I took a walk out in the full moonlight. Each Erev Passover, I remembered how God had rescued me from feelings or behaviors that threatened to enslave me. And each Passover, I thank God for mercy. This Passover, though, that Passover in Cusco, I was especially grateful not only for my marriage, but also for my decision to return to Judaism, and for my husband, for his love and his understanding and his support. As night covered the city of Cusco, I realized, you know, I wasn't going to be able to see the moon from our hotel. And so I said to Joe, would you mind if we walk down to the town square? It's Passover and I need to pray. Well, he knew about my custom. So he said, well, sure, I'd love to. So we walked hand in hand and past buildings constructed by Incan natives and then appropriated by Spanish warriors and then converted by New World settlers to churches, government houses, and villas. Well, when we reached the square, there was a large open space and it allowed us to have a perfect view of the Passover moon. Joe and I stood on some steps in front of this large building, and I just looked up at the moon and started to try to pray. Well, I felt uneasy, fearful. And what was wrong? I was safe. Joe was right by my side. Still, I felt uncomfortable. I tried to pray again. Fear this time stronger. What was going on? We'd been to foreign countries before on Passover, and this had never happened before. Well, I tried to pray again, And no, still, instead, little scraps of terror just came to the surface. Joe, I said, this isn't working. I just can't pray. Let's go back to the hotel. Tomorrow night's Passover too. I'll do my Passover thing tomorrow night. And Joe said, I don't mind staying a little longer. And I said, no, I really want to. I don't know what's wrong, but I'm a little afraid. I know one thing for sure. I can't pray. So we turned around to go back to the hotel. Oh my God, said Joe. What? I said, I know why you can't pray. What do you mean? I said. Look at the building we're standing in front of, he said. So I turned around, looked at the building, and then at the words inscribed on the stones. Local de Inquisición, the place of the Inquisition. The next morning, I asked our guide. Oh, yes, he said. 250 years ago, many Jews were murdered on that spot. Local de la Inquisición. In my imagination, I saw 653 men tortured for their faith, 428 women stripped of their dignity. I saw tears fall from the faces of 1,000 children as their parents passed by. I saw my spiritual ancestors burned for the faith I held dear. How was that night different from all other nights? That was the night that I knew I had passed over. I was no longer Christian. To the core of my soul, I knew that I was a Jew. I came to believe that my soul was always Jewish, like Mary Rita. Even before I was conceived, perhaps my soul was one of the unborn souls of the Holocaust. And so I wrote this prayer, conceived 1945. Unborn infants, Jewish wombs, Hitler's flames became their tombs. Raised on ash, they curled their fists. Voices joined in outraged cries. Micha Mocha Adonai, does your power still exist? Mercy's touch dispelled their gloom. Souls returned to Gentile wombs, breathed to life, and by God blessed. Raised to pray in foreign ways, strangers searching all their days, restless till they find their home. Now their heart's desires burn. 100,000 gers return, Jewish souls no more to roam. Out of ashes I was made. Praise the Holy One who saves. She'asani Israel. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, who has made me a Jew.
Amen. Amen.
Shulamit, if I may, before we continue. Eli, Eli, Shelo Yigamer Leolam, Hachol V'Hayam, Rishrush Shel Hamayim, Barak HaShamayim, Tfilat Hadam, Rishrush Shel Hamayim, Barak HaShamayim, Tfilat Hadam. Maili my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
So beautiful, the stories and the music. And I personally, Mark asked if there's something we identify with. I truly believe that I died in the Holocaust and that this is of my next lifetime. And I know that there are lots and lots of other people who feel that they had very fast incarnations. So I can identify with that. Anybody else have something that they'd like to add to the conversation? Well, then maybe we're done.
Well, Mary Rita has her hand up. And for those of you who presented, first of all, thank you so much. It was everything and more that I had hoped for and envisioned. I'm kind of envisioning and hoping for maybe a conversation among the presenters of appreciations between you that might give rise to questions or just observations and of things that resonated with you. Mary Rita, maybe you'll start that off.
Yeah, so Bina, and we've talked about this before, but my first Me Too was that part of me that never feels like I know enough, because I was not raised Jewish, I struggle with Hebrew. I work so hard, but I struggle with learning Hebrew. And I never feel like I know enough. And yet I have been given a gift, like especially through my time in Hashba'ah, to get to a place that I can say enough, not enough is okay. And when you talked about how you chose your name, there was a Me Too. I didn't just look at the Tree of Life because I didn't know the Tree of Life at that point, but I knew the women. I knew it was the women that led me to Judaism. So it was Sarah and Rivka and Rachel and Leah and Miriam and Ruth. And I would be driving around thinking, no, I don't think it's Sarah. I don't feel called to that. And I had such an affinity to Miriam. And and Ruth she chose Judaism. And of course, Dan said, well, then you can still be MR, with the Mary Rita and the Miriam Ruth. And as I am more and more in renewal, I love the name Zohar also. I didn't know that it was a name that could be male or female, but I love that sense of radiant light. And I love how we get called. So they were some of my Me Too's. And so I can start, and I know Eliana, you jumped in also of really knowing that you had been born during the Holocaust. And
Yeah, I too
so
read as a teenager every book I could get my hands on about the Holocaust, and
I
yeah,
was obsessed with World War II too. I didn't know
yeah,
why.
yeah.
Watched everything possible on PBS. But
And
I
I
think
wasn't Catholic, but wanted to be a nun.
well, I was struck by how we were all Catholic. And I think a couple of you, Mary Rita and somebody else, I forget, said, that we came to Judaism, but we also left the Catholic Church. And I know that for me, the leaving of it had to do with what felt like hypocrisy. And that's why, I feel like as someone who has tried to live a life of service and advocacy. I wanted that concreteness, a manifestation of my faith. And I was seeing just the opposite in the elders in the churches that I went to. I mean, including abuse and things. And so I couldn't make space for that in my head. And to protect myself almost, I had to kind of push it to one side.
I was asked once, what was I willing to die on the hill of being a Jew? And I realized that I was. And that was part of my choosing of it, was that I wanted to believe something was me enough that if I needed to die for it, I would. I guess that's a strange thing to bring up, but it was an important thing to me to be serious enough. You know, I'm a jocular person and I try to find lightness in things, but this was very serious to me, especially since I'm the only one in my family, you know, and they kept asking me funny questions and, why do you want to be called Bina? You know, what is this about? It was hard to deal with that. So I needed to know that I was there for my life and my death.
Eliana?
I'm also the only one in my family, and I'm the only one in my town who's Jewish. So I know the feeling of being alone with Judaism. I often get little missives from my brother trying to save me. And, you know, I have to understand that it's coming from a place of love and concern. I have developed a gratitude for my Catholic past, because everything in my past that brought me to this place has been a gift to me. I feel like I'm uniquely knowledgeable about deep ecumenism because I live it. I have a Catholic husband, and you know we have a deeply ecumenistic family. So I'm very grateful for it. As far as choosing my name, I chose Eliana because after years and years of searching and knowing what I needed to have in my life, God answered me.
Mhm.
Mary?
I think the one thing that struck me as I was listening to your stories was that we all at one point or another said something about feeling like we were coming home. And that we did a lot of moving when I was growing up. And one of the few things that was consistent was the Catholic Church, you know, because they were all pretty much the same from place to place, until I ran into a priest who never thought ever that anybody should ever have the ability or the chutzpah to question what he thought and said. How dare I? Well, you know, that was his mishigas. That's not mine. And one of the things I loved about Judaism was the different translations and the different meanings, and the fact that it was okay not to know everything. It was okay to just keep growing. And when I would be hired as a teacher, as an ed director, that became my underlying mission, was to help people I interacted with continue to grow. And I also had one of those brothers. I had 4 brothers, so whatever kind you had, I probably had one of them. But also had one brother who is a born-again Christian, and I would say born-again Christian with a vengeance. And he reamed me out at a couple of family celebrations. And I had to realize that it was that was his craziness. It wasn't mine. I didn't own it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mary. And I just want to acknowledge that Shulamit was not feeling well, and she left a few minutes early, but I've already sent her a note, and if you want to send her a note as well after we're done, that'd be wonderful. Anybody else? I have something I do want to lift up, but go ahead,
I just
Mary Reed. I want to hear from you.
Just in response, Eliana, I love, I often say I live deep ecumenism, but I live it within my own self. And I love how you live it. And it was really coming to renewal and learning about deep ecumenism and Reb Zalman. And it was Reb Nadia who helped me bring my Catholicism, I say, out of the closet, and to begin to see how they flow together. And it has given me a call to really want to work even more deeply in this area of deep ecumenism. And Bina, we've talked about it. So, I know that there are a couple of us that really feel drawn in that area. And I see Deborah's hand up.
I would like to just say, without giving any details to detract from your stories, that I relate to many parts of what you have all spoken of today. And I guess the only thing I'll say right now is I also feel like I don't know enough. So it's a common theme for a lot of us. So let's just keep learning.
Thank you, Deborah. That's exactly what I was going to pick up on. Reb Zalman of blessed memory was always pointed out that we're all Jews by choice, even those of us who entered into the covenant through bloodline. With the smorgasbord, using a New York term, a variety of spiritual practices to choose from or not choose from in our age. That we're all making the choice to be Jewish, and then picking up what you just lifted up, Deborah, and what Shari, Sivia, before, you also in the chat, I think that's what you were responding to, that I have, when you said, I have felt this, and I think my cat is also now chiming in as well, that he has felt. I'll get to you in a minute. That never ends, and I'm actually going to be touching on that this Shabbos, because this is the parsha in which Moshe lays hands on Yehoshua, on Joshua, and administers smicha, l'smoach, to pass on the transmission of leadership. And I didn't even know what the word smicha meant when I started my journey, and I'm going to be sharing some of that, of my journey to becoming a rabbi this Shabbos, and give you too an opportunity to talk between you in breakthrough rooms, to talk about something related to that as well. But if there's anything that any of you want to learn, let me know. And if I don't have the time to study with you, we'll make time on a Wednesday night to raise that up, or we'll find someone for you to study with. As you know, now that once we all went on Zoom, almost everybody in this room I know of has taken great advantage of the endless opportunities to study. And for me, and I can only assume for you, it's really hard to be where you are and to accept it. All the could'ves and should'ves, and maybe if I had started earlier and all of that stuff. Well, we're only where we are right now, and to deepen that through study is a wonderful and powerful thing to do at any age and at any moment in our lives. Knowing what to study, that is sometimes the trick, right? And something that's not going to be too difficult, and yet something that is going to be very meaningful to you and resonate in a deep way. So Deborah and Sivia, thank you for raising that up. And thank you all for sharing. It felt like I was trying to put pieces of a puzzle together all night, but isn't it wonderful that there are so many pieces to your stories that are the same and different? And that's what Shulamit says, love about storytelling. I would be remiss if we didn't open up the room. If any of you have any comments about the evening or any questions for anyone, please let's leave a few minutes to do that, and then we'll close up.
Mark, can I ask the group a question?
Of course, fine.
So I am curious how people navigate the world in terms of identifying ourselves as Jewish. I'm masked because I'm not an obvious candidate. And so I have to tell people. But occasionally I found myself in situations where I could have plausibly said something else because it was an uncomfortable situation, something slightly threatening in the neighborhood or whatever. And I've wondered how we have processed what happened with, not just remote, but like pretty recent incidents of hate, and how readily we put ourselves out there and identify ourselves as being Jewish. I mean, my flavor of it being brown is different, but that's a question I have for the group.
Wow, Eliana is I think ready to add her thoughts to your question, Mai.
I don't look especially Jewish either. And sometimes if a person says to me, "Oh, you don't look Jewish," I'll respond, "But this is what Jewish looks like." As far as feeling threatened, occasionally I do feel threatened when I'm out of my safe space, or I'm out of my home situation. In this town that I live in, which is the bright red buckle of the Bible Belt, where being a Jew isn't the done thing, I feel threatened sometimes. I feel threatened sometimes when I go on vacation, on trips, on airplanes. I am careful not to wear any identifying jewelry, just in case. I wouldn't want to get on a plane and, be the target of anyone. I think that I feel safety in the numbers with my birth family, with my own family, and with my Jewish family. And with other people, I tend to feel some anxiety, some small level of anxiety and fear. DeBarty.
Shimano, thank you, Eliana. Someone raised, I don't know who it was, the possibility of making this another evening. Certainly when we can take that under advisement, it might be very powerful to do that. And the whole topic of Jewish identity certainly is something that we all wrestle with. I didn't always wear my kippah all of the time. And there are times now where I have a baseball hat on instead of, taking it off and have my kippah underneath for what should be obvious reasons if I'm not feeling, safe in a certain place. But when I get to Israel now, the cap comes off, and I feel safe there to do it. But sometimes I put my cap on for different reasons. But that's a whole other conversation. Dan, we have a few minutes left. Please, if you can keep your remarks brief, I would appreciate that.
I always do. No, the just in answer to Mai's question, I personally haven't felt threatened or anti-Semitism or anything, but I know on college campuses that can be a big deal because of the association of Jews with Zionism and Israel, and Zionism in Israel being a big problem for a lot of liberal progressive organizations, and that really are very angry about Israel as being an oppressor, et cetera, et cetera. So in those situations on campuses, I've heard lots of stories about kids, college kids being threatened, very unsafe, and unable to join progressive groups that they would otherwise. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And actually, that's a whole other topic for another evening as well. And I'm thinking now that maybe we should bring somebody in to address that and perhaps lead us in a discussion about it. Which makes me think about there's an unending number of ways that we can spend Wednesday nights. Please, if you have any ideas, if you know people who might be willing to come and talk to us and with us about a certain subject, by all means. Thank you all so much. Let's end with a song, but before we do, thank you, Eliana, thank you, Mary Rita, thank you, Bina and Mai, and I'm missing somebody, thanking them. Who am I missing? Mary. I think that's everybody. And as soon as anybody hears from Elka, let me know. I pray everything is okay with her. I also sent her an email. So let's end with the song, Hannah Sender's poetry that was put to music that I sang before, Eli, Eli. I'm going to share my screen with you, which I pulled up, of course, on the trusty internet. And we'll close with that. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol v'hayam, rishrush shel hamayim, barak hashamayim, tfilat hadam, hachol v'hayam, rishrush shel hamayim, barak hashamayim, tfilat hadam. Eli, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heaven, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed rest of your evening, and hopefully see many of you on this Shabbos morning.